5 o'clock. I'd like to welcome you to the meeting of the Beaufort County Board of Education Academics Committee meeting. Today is May 4th. This meeting is being live streamed by the county channel. Request
County's not on yet.
Okay.
County's not on there yet.
Okay.
She said. Going to need, so let me see if she's sent. She's in, sorry.
Okay, ready? All right. Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Beaufort County Board of Education Academics Committee meeting. Today's May 4th, and we are, County Channel is broadcasting this meeting. So at this time, request for public comment would be accepted between 3 and 3:30. That time has passed, so it doesn't make sense for me to make that statement at this time. At this time, I need a, first we're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve today's agenda.
Thank you.
Second that motion.
Okay. Second by Mr. Mel Campbell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda, approving the agenda, signify by saying aye. That's 4-0. Robin, do we have any public comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Prior to moving into the approval of the committee meeting minutes, I would like to take a minute to identify the members in the room. We have committee member Angela Middleton, committee member Mel Campbell, committee member Dick Geyer, committee member Kathy Robine, liaison ISD specialist Dr. Mary Stratos, legal Wendy Cartilage, and Julian Rowland, and board member Tricia Fidrick. Okay, so next on the agenda, and of course, Robin Kishenberry.
Do you have board member online? David's online.
Oh, did not see that. And online, we have David Stribinger. Anyone else?
And then you have the staff from ISD.
Okay, and they'll be introduced as we move through the agenda. Thank you. Didn't realize David was there. So next on the agenda is approval of the March 30th committee meeting minutes.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the March 30th, 2022 committee meeting minutes.
Second.
Second by Colonel Geyer. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. That's 4-0. Okay, so next on the agenda, do you want to go to the AR first, or what? How did you want to do it, Dr. Stratus?
Are you going to be quick? Just
Yes,
to
ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
all
ma'am.
right.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members. This administrative regulation IS-4 school year calendar, we have made a brief revision to it to cite the statute in the South Carolina Code of Laws 59 is education statute to include item number 6. You'll see on page 2, event days, election days in November of each even numbered year. So we wanted to clarify that for everybody, and then we added in our new coherent governance manual policies.
Okay.
So the main thing is November, we want to make sure it's in there. Okay.
Thank you. So the only thing that was added to this AR was. That's correct. Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Moving on, Dr. Stratos. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mrs. Robine. This evening, we have 3 presentations from Instructional Services Division. We'll first start with Colleen Beckenbarsky, Ann Aida, and Lynn Sunday. Colleen is our Director for Educational Technology. You're familiar with her work. Ann is a tech coach and a former librarian. And Lynn Sunday is a school librarian as well as a teacher of the year. So with that, Ms. Becca Barsky.
Good evening. Thank you for having us tonight to share with you about our incredible school libraries and librarians. And we are going to jump right in the, for our time's sake. I wanted to start off just with some quick nomenclature here. So we have had a lot of different position titles for a school librarian versus a media specialist. Some places call them library information specialists. So I just wanted to make sure that we all are aware that in January of 2010 that the ALA, the American Library Association, did formally adopt the position title of a school librarian. And part of that adoption of that title was that over the course of many years that they were going to start with their state groups to start to change that language. So we saw within the past 3 to 5 years, South Carolina has begun to shift that language from a media specialist over to a school librarian, and in their documentation on their websites. So you'll see us even accidentally switch between the two just because of that shift, but we will reference them as school librarians throughout the presentation and moving forward. So there is some documentation there as well for you to look at yourselves. So Robin, if you'll move on. And Dr. Stratus, did you want to share about this one before I move on? This was your vision.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Colleen.
No problem.
So if you see on slide 3, it is a combination of a vision, what we see for the future, and we were trying to drive our direction for our school libraries. I'll pause for a few moments for you to review. And what we're seeking is an integrative approach. We recognize that our school libraries are a repository of knowledge, print, but we also recognize they're a repository electronically, creativity, and growth. What we're trying to create as we go forward with this presentation, you'll hear a little more, is setting up a standard for our school system of expectations that we're returning the pages within the 21st century. So with that, Ms. Colleen.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So throughout our presentation, you'll hear us reference the AASL, and Robin, you can move to the next slide. The AASL is a division of the American Library Association. The American Association for School Librarians is the division that really focuses on K-12 instruction and the defining the future of what it looks like in a school. So the AASL is really that driving force for our school librarians so that they have a compass to point toward. So they have documentations for us, and in 2018, they updated some school library standards that we work with students. And if you move to the next slide, you'll see kind of where those standards fit in. They are an all-encompassing area for any subject area, any content area to collaborate with the school library and pull in some of those literacy and research skills into that content. So this is just a graphic to identify that so that you can kind of have an idea of where those are coming from. If you go ahead and move on. The other thing that AASL really establishes for us is the common beliefs. And this is really that central ideas to the profession. This is that foundation that our school librarians use in their everyday work. So you'll see that these 6 common beliefs will drive the rest of our presentation. We took these 6 beliefs as that foundation, surveyed our staff, and are able to kind of see where we measure up against each of those. So if you move to the next, I'll explain sort of our survey. So we surveyed school librarians and teachers and administrators. We had 111 submissions that came in, which is awesome. I was really thrilled to see that. There's a lot of data in here. I wanted you to have it all. We're not going to go through every single one, but we're going to highlight some specific ones. Where you see the book, that means a school librarian was asked that question. And where you see an apple, that means a teacher and administrator was asked that question. So you have a gauge of what goes on through here. So that first common belief from the AASL is the school library is a unique and essential part of the learning community. The definition that you have there is straight from the AASL so that they can kind of articulate what exactly that means. And the main focus in here is access, providing access to the school library. So if you move on through, you'll see kind of where we've measured up. So this first one just speaks about allowing kids to kind of naturally drop in when they need a book. It's that flex time for them to come in. The next one focuses on scheduled visits. So when a class comes in, for a scheduled time. A lot of times we will see a fixed schedule more in an elementary school where they're on a rotation and the kids come in, read a book, get a book, versus a high school who might have a more flex schedule where they come in at a specific time for research or around a certain content area that needs some of that support. So you can go ahead and move on. Sorry, someone's coming in the media center, so I apologize. This one is just kind of captures when the library is used for multiple different things, so that you'll hear us talk about the need for flexible space. And this really shows the need for that. So Ron, if you'll move on to 13. That highlights our next area, which we're going to spend a little extra time on. I'm going to kick over to Lynn. This really talks about our staff and having qualified school librarians in the libraries. So the next slide there will just show you that in the state of South Carolina, our state board regulation does enforce that they are a certified school librarian, that they are certified in the area, and then it builds out some ratios for us for staffing. So we have a guidance for how many kids a ratio to a school librarian. And then you can go ahead and move to slide 16 for Lynn.
Good evening. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the changing role of a school librarian. So these are our major roles as a leader, a teacher, community partner, technology specialist, and my favorite, we drive literacy within our school. So in the leadership department, being a librarian is really a leadership role within the school. And we assist with leadership, planning out our yearly, monthly planning. We collaborate with teachers, our school improvement plans. We are extremely integral with the social media. We do our website, and school events are always right up our alley. A lot of us want to focus in on our school choice focus in with our media center lessons when the students come for those lessons throughout the year. One of our main priorities is to be the voice of our school online. And we've got to be willing to find answers for others. Most people come to the school librarian for all those questions that they have no idea where else to turn. And our most important thing is creating that space for students to feel included and valued and welcome. Giving them activities, lessons that are engaging are at the top of our list. And as a teacher, we collaborate with all grade levels. We have to know all content areas. We need to be a lead teacher among our peers. One of my favorite things, we get to share instructional strategies with teachers, different ideas, different resources, and help them as they're developing lesson plans. We need to know of a wealth of resources for both our teachers and our students. And we have to continue our professional development to be ahead in our field. We also need to effectively run a classroom because we teach all of the students in the school. And we want to work on literacy skills to aid our students' comprehension with their lessons, and also integrate technology, sharing new resources both to students and to teachers and training them on those new resources. And again, we want to model in our school's emphasis with our media lessons. As a community partner, we want to work with our volunteers. Often the media center library is the first place those volunteers come in the school. So we welcome them. We usually host things. We kind of have that informational outlet between our community and our school and help give information back and forth to our parents and our community. We also want to be that welcoming space for our community members that come in to provide services for our school. We also work with our PTO. We want to help promote our school. As a technology specialist, we are asked to share those technology resources. Again, not only with students, but with staff members too, and help train them and help them with any information they need. And technology issues, we have to troubleshoot a good bit from time to time. We also help with rollout, collection of devices, and sometimes with different purchases and needs of the school, figuring those out and ordering the correct thing to meet the needs of your school. Makerspace is a fun area for our students to get hands-on and enjoy that collaborative time working together. So we want to design and implement and have those activities rotating to keep students interested. And we also need to be able to train teachers on different technological programs. And again, we have to keep up with our technology training as well. This is my favorite. We get to drive literacy. So our most vital and foundational role is to build a collection that represents all learners in our school. We want to allow the students and the staff to have a voice in what our collection looks like and the things that are available for them. We love sharing book talks and getting students and teachers interested in all different books, things they might not have picked up on their own. We assist in book selection. That's one of the things we drop what we're doing and help people find that right book and share that passion and importance of literacy. We also work with the county library program. We've been doing that really well these past 5 years to help bridge that gap with summer reading. And it's our job to create those lessons and fun contests to build that student interest.
So I do want to mention about our library assistants. So this captures the library assistants that we have in our buildings and really what they really help us to do. And if you move to the next one, you'll see sort of how their days are spent, but they are really vital in helping to promote some of that flexibility. So the school librarian can focus on those lessons or those classes coming in, and they can still have the library open for check-in and check-out for some of that flex scheduling, which is vital to keeping kids interested in reading. So the third common belief is learners should be prepared for college and career life. And this really has focused on improving for their success and the instruction that happens with the school librarian in the school library. So you'll see the survey results for the amount of time on instructing classes, and then also with independent or small groups. If you will, because we really want to get to an important part here, move to slide 31. This is focusing on our collections and our digital resources and our print materials and all of the library resources that we do have in our school libraries. And IEDA works very heavily in two primary systems for our school librarians, our Follett Destiny technologies management system, and then our Sora ebook platform. So she's going to share with you the information around our collections and our library resources.
Hi, I just wanted to take a minute to kind of introduce these two primary ways that our school libraries provide our students and our employees with books. Follett Destiny is our main cataloging and circulation system. So it's used for physical materials that you would traditionally find on the shelves of the school library, books, DVDs, headphones, equipment, all of those kinds of things. Very similar to the way the public library would use a different program to circulate items in and out. Sora is a shared district-wide catalog of specifically ebooks, audiobooks, and digital magazines or periodicals. This is organized a little bit differently in that we have one common collection for the whole district to use, whereas Follett Destiny is a little more site-based. The numbers at the bottom show circulation numbers for each of those resources from the beginning of August of this year to just the very end of April. I wanted to note a couple of things here that you'll probably notice just looking at the numbers here. So elementary school circulation tends to be much higher across the board than any other grade level band. That does make sense when you start thinking about it in these terms. There are more schools at that grade level and there are more students in them. The books are also a lot shorter for those grade levels, so they will finish them and return them a lot faster than a high school student might return a 300-page novel. Elementary schools are a lot more likely to be on a fixed schedule rotation as well, which means those kids are getting in on a regular basis, maybe once a week or once every other week. And in that setup, they're typically check out a book every time they come and visit the space. Middle and high school students are certainly using their libraries, but they're more likely to do so kind of on their free time in between classes or during lunch or before or after school, or maybe in their ELA classrooms. Another trend across the board is that print materials tend to circulate at a much higher rate than the digital materials that are available in Sora. This also makes sense, but is a little less obvious. So Sora and ebooks in general work a lot differently than print material. So first, these books are shared district-wide. All 20,000 plus students are kind of competing for the same books, so to speak. So they do circulate much like a print book in that only one student can access each book at a time. So when you're sharing those among 20,000 students instead of a couple hundred, there's typically going to be a little more waiting period. Sometimes they have to place a hold and wait for their turn for the book. We've also only been building the Sora collection for about 11 years. So there's not as many books in there to choose from, especially compared to some of our older schools that have been building their collection over a couple of decades. And different publishers also have different rules for their ebooks as well, which make it a little more difficult to amass a very large collection of books. It's very publisher driven. Some publishers have rules that a book can only circulate for 26 individual checkouts before a library would have to purchase another copy of that book if they wanted to keep using it. It's not my favorite setup, but it's just the way the ebook industry works in general. So just wanted to explain that as a possible difference there. If we go to the next slide, the linked document at the top of the page is the South Carolina Standards for School Library Collections. And this is pretty much the guiding document for school library collection development in South Carolina. It gives some general guidelines for the types and number of resources that each school library should have. I just wanted to note the document we have linked here is the 2012 version. Technically, it was updated in 2016, but that version is not yet posted on the SCDE website. So we included screenshots from the 2012 version. The document is almost 20 pages long, so I'm just going to cover just a little highlight here. The image on this page is a screenshot of the document's recommendations for print materials in a K-5 library specifically. So if you look at the top of the page in the colored bars, you can see that they've outlined kind of different parameters for what they've termed either at-risk, basic, or exemplary libraries. The whole top section covers just a basic criteria of the sheer number of fiction and nonfiction books that a library should have. At minimum, they recommend 11 books per student, but ideally 13 or 15 to be considered exemplary. Now, I just want to note here, the number of books per student is a valuable goal to reach for, but it's equally important that the resources in a library be accurate and current. So for that reason, at the bottom of the document, they outline some basic guidelines for how old the books in a collection should be on average. So if you look at the very bottom right corner, you'll see that for an exemplary library collection, they recommend that the books have an average copyright date of no more than 11 years from the current date. If you look above that section, you can see that there are even different guidelines for different sections of the library. So for an exemplary library, they recommend that the average age of the fiction books be no more than 15 years old. And for nonfiction, that number drops way down to 5 years old. That makes sense if you think about it. When students are using nonfiction books to learn about science or medicine or engineering or any field that changes rapidly, you want to make sure they're reading current and accurate information. So in essence, maintaining the currency and accuracy of a collection is done in a couple of ways. One, by adding new materials when needed, but also a very misunderstood part of collection development is called weeding, which is essentially removing old, damaged, or inaccurate materials from library shelves, just like you would do when you weed a garden. That's why it's called weeding. So this needs to be done regularly to bring up the average age of the collection. Another section of the standards document discusses periodicals like magazines, newspapers, or academic journals. This screenshot shows the recommendation for 9th through 12th grade schools. The state library provides online access to a number of periodicals via their SC Discus service, which is available to all South Carolina residents, including students. This can count for up to 50% of the quotas listed here. Of course, many schools supplement that by purchasing print magazine subscriptions that they make available for in-library use. And we also have a number of magazines through Sora. The great thing about the Sora magazines is that unlike the books, those aren't limited to one checkout per book at a time. These are more of a subscription model. So in theory, all of our students could check out the Time magazine for kids at the same time if they wanted to. And we're also able to kind of limit which magazine students have access to based on their grade level. So if you want to see more details about that, you can access that link at the bottom. All right, moving on to the next slide. When we asked our librarians and staff about the accessibility of, oh wait, I'm sorry, I skipped a slide. When we polled our librarians and staff, most of them agreed that our libraries were doing a good job of encouraging independent reading. Libraries play kind of a unique role in literacy development because our books aren't typically used as a specific assignment or with a specific associated grade. With library books, students can have a greater deal of voice and choice in what they read, which just gives them a chance to strengthen their literacy skills while reading something that genuinely interests them. If you go down to the next page, we also asked our librarians and staff about the accessibility of their library collections, which just addresses whether or not our libraries are meeting the needs of diverse learners with a broad range of learning styles, reading levels, languages, disabilities. Ebooks are really helping us with meeting the needs of students with specifically visual disabilities. They have some built-in accessibility changes that a regular print book wouldn't have. You can increase the font size. You can choose a dyslexic friendly font. You can choose a high contrast mode to read your book in. There's also a number of digital audiobooks in there as well. Can you move on to the next page, please? So our next question, I think, identified a potential area of growth for us. We just asked whether or not our libraries motivated students to read through creative programming like book talks, displays, and author visits. Results were still generally positive, but just a little less enthusiastic on this particular question. I do anticipate this kind of growing naturally as we return to a sort of post-COVID normal when we're able to get in authors and have those like big programs that we have, not been able to do so much over the last few years. But we can definitely make this a focus of our professional development for this group going forward. So in the interest of time, Robin, we're going to skip this next slide. And I'm going to turn over on the next slide and turn it back to Colleen.
So our number 5 common belief is the intellectual freedom of every learner's rights. So if you see the next 2 poll results, that our staff sees a positive, diverse and inclusive collection with positive reflections of themselves, their family, and their community. You can go ahead and skip to 42. And this is really around technology and the technology specialists like Lynn had mentioned before. Again, in the interest of time, I just want to skip down to 44, where it talks about stationary computers in the media centers and in our school libraries. And these we tend to see kind of split that they're in there. This is excluding one-to-one devices. These are stationary computers set up. And what we typically see them used for is research, if their computer is maybe in for repair, or to search our catalogs. The next one directly speaks about maker spaces, and you can see that we have the majority that do not currently have a makerspace in their media centers. So this would definitely be an area of growth. The ones that do, we captured some of the common materials they have and the common ways they're utilizing that makerspace in their school libraries currently. But this is definitely somewhere we want to push some of our professional development so that we can have some of that across the board. I do want to make sure that we mention physical space. This does not fall into one of those common beliefs, but this is really important. We know a lot of our media centers have already been updated or on deck to be updated. So really just focusing on the flexible space, because with an evolving role, you have to have the evolving space to be able to do a lot of what we've already talked about. And then if you move to 48, it's kind of our next steps. Where do we go from here? We have all this information, all this stuff, all these surveys that we got back. What do we do? So we are starting off by updating some ARs, making sure that they are current and they reflect all of these that come out of our common beliefs. We'll be working on updating a procedures manual, which will include many of what we talked about before: common processes for weeding, common processes for inventory and budgeting. Increasing that PD, as I mentioned, around makerspaces, and as well as just ASL and SCASL, the local division, as much as possible. We are developing a meeting schedule to meet collaboratively as school librarians every month, beginning next year. So we're able to make sure we keep that conversation amongst the professionals needed. And then again, consistency, and then making sure we have stakeholder input. If you move to the next one, the big one too is also, how do we sustain this? If we implement all of these things, we want to make sure we are current collections. We want to make sure our makerspaces are filled with the things that they need for their STEM learning and those innovative skills. How do we go about doing that? So part of that procedures manual will include the details around each of these areas. How do we inventory? How often? How do we weed? How often? How do we assess what library resources we need, whether it's print material, digital material, technology materials, budgeting for those, making sure that that's set in place. And then of course, the purchasing and refreshing of each of these items. So with that, it's a lot of information, but we really appreciate being able to share it all with you. We will open the floor to any questions that you have.
Okay, who wants to go first?
I got a lot of questions.
Okay, go.
Very good. Thank you very much. Very enlightening. I have a issue with your survey. It's nice that you have administrators and teachers be surveyed. What about students? What about students? Why don't you have a survey of how do the students use and disuse, or what they would like to see? Well, has there been a certain student survey?
So we haven't conducted one yet. That is planned for the fall. Just in light of the time of year, we wanted to make sure that their focus was on their instruction and getting ready for their testing, and we didn't want to divert away from the focus they were already at. But we do have and plan to do so in the fall, once we're back in school and have things back in the swing of the school year. But just because of the time that we put this one out, we just wanted to make sure that they were focused in their instruction at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
One issue is librarians have a key role in risk management. And by that, I mean, you are the gurus of copyright. You should be the experts on copyright usage, licensing, and so on. Because I have seen school districts, schools, universities get in big trouble. Because, for example, I was at a community college where the nursing program was, instead of having the students buy Gray's Anatomy, which is about a $400 textbook, the teacher would simply go in and run copies of appropriate pages. And somebody blew the whistle and we had a huge fine. So that tells me, and there's the other thing that I get from constituents. And the constituents tell me, you are not using 1619 project in your classes, are you? And my answer to that is 1619 is a copyrighted material. And as a copyrighted material, it has to be approved by the state, and you have to purchase a license, or you have, it's not something that you can just copy off from the New York Times, even from the common New York Times. It was in a Sunday supplement. It's copyrighted.
Mhm.
One of the things I tell constituents is I believe, and I hope I'm saying the right thing, that our librarians, I'll use rather than media specialists, our librarians have some control over copy machines and what teachers copy. I hope that's the case. That there are not copy machines in break rooms and other places where temptation occurs. So please help me feel good about this risk piece.
I'm gonna step in first, yeah.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
I'm gonna go from the most recent backwards. With the copy machine, it's also significant with regard to footprint.
Yes.
So the footprint of the facility would make it rather difficult for most educators who go to what we would love to be our hub.
Yeah.
Right, so that's part of the work as well, that as administrators, we're going into the classroom, seeing what is being instructed, what are the tools being utilized, because the state also says under code that if we deviate from state resources and approved district resources, that school and principal must give permission. So it is that circulation of the school administrator that helps with that. So I wanted to land on that one, but I have to give commentary. They are the copyright police.
Yes.
They are
Yes.
very much what we do in PD, what we develop as a system, their integrity. And I mean it with most heart at it.
Yeah.
They're very good.
Yes. And that's that's so important.
Yeah.
And it's something, and I hope teachers are educated because they are the ones that are tempted the most, and for right reasons. I mean, and not, they don't do it cause anybody any harm or anything. They want to give their kids material. But you have to be careful. And one last thing, if I
Okay,
may.
and then we're gonna go on.
Yes.
One more.
I've been in all the media centers, just about every school, because that's where we meet first, and I look around. And I see all the books there, and I say, do we have data that say how often that book is checked out? Or, my son's an attorney, and attorneys used to give their ads behind a wall of a law library. They don't do that anymore, do they? They use LexisNexis.
Westlaw.
That's what I'm saying is, do we have an anachronism in our big, nice display of books that no one ever checks out? Or if I was to ask my grandson, how many books have you checked out of the Beaufort High School library? I'll bet you I wouldn't get many, if any. So are we focused on the future? And I get the number of books that you can have and the number of checkouts and the periodicals. That's great. That's the future. But I want to make sure that we are not just looking good and not being good for the average person walking into the media center. Wow, look at all the books. Now, in the elementary schools, absolutely, that's different. Lots of books. You want the kids with lots of books, pick them up. But middle school, high school, so help me understand that you guys are looking for the future, that how things are going to be done, and the good things that can be done with online, or I use Kindle. And I wish I had Kindle when I had to read Shakespeare, because when I found a word that I didn't know what it was, I could push on it and it would tell me that a strumpet is such and such. So, you know, that's my frustration with where we're going in libraries. So help me.
I can speak a little bit to the ebook aspect of that. The ebook industry in general is really geared towards direct sales to private consumers. So Amazon really got out ahead of every other member of the pack who developed their own e-reader platform and priced their books so low that they got pretty much the mass market appeal there. Which is great. It's great that, you know, readers can instantly find a book on Amazon for relatively, you know, a low cost and then instantly start reading it, which is fantastic. The problem is that ebooks aren't always super friendly to library lending. And a lot of this, like most things, comes down to the publisher's ability to make money. So they don't always love the idea of selling ebooks to a public library, a school library, an academic library, and having us own that material indefinitely and be able to circulate it to many, 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 many patrons over time. And they've only made that one sale. So the library approach to ebook lending is much more complicated than the private consumer model. I've kind of mentioned it on that previous slide, but different publishers do have very different rules for how libraries can lend their books. I'll just name one off the top of my head because they're one of the first ones to come out and do this. Harper Collins has a policy, and I believe I'm still accurate on this. I know I was previously. They were selling their books for a relatively normal cost, I would say, but that book could only circulate to 26 patrons in a library setting before it expired out of your library catalog. And you would have to buy another one if you wanted to circulate that book to more than the 26 patrons. And I think the rationale there was that most library checkout periods are about 2 weeks. So I think the idea was, you know, print materials degrade over time. They get torn, the dog eats it, it gets left out in the rain. Something happens to that book that naturally kind of weeds it from a library collection, necessitating that every once in a while I have to buy another copy of Brown Bear, just because my original copy is in such poor condition. Ebooks don't degrade in that same way. So restricting that lending model was kind of their way of ensuring that this would be a viable business model for them going forward to even begin to sell ebooks to libraries so that they could lend them to patrons. So it's not quite an apples to apples comparison to say, do we need all these print materials in our library when we have ebooks to replace them? Because in the library world, it's not really a fair or economical replacement in all situations.
Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, did you have a question?
Yeah, couple of things. How do you measure an effective library? In terms of, how do you know who's using it, how many students using it, and who those students are? Can you do that, or do we do it?
Do you want to go ahead, Lynn, or may I?
Yeah, I saw Linda.
So-
Yes, we can run reports. We can see our top patrons. We can see our top homerooms. And to answer the question before, to know you have an effective library, I can have lists of kids waiting on a book. I can get them so interested in that book by doing book talks that I might have 15 kids waiting on the same book. So having that relationship with them, getting them in there for lessons, you can build an effective program that is very much the hub of your school. I have taught at elementary and middle, and there is a feel in a school when your library is the hub of the school. But we can run those reports. I have been trying to highlight some of those kids and give them shout outs on the morning news and stuff like that lately. But we also want to appeal to those kids who don't think there's anything in there for them to read. We just have to find that right book for them, and then they're hooked.
It's their collaboration with the faculty, with the teachers. And a teacher that never comes to the library versus a teacher that comes to the library every 2 weeks. How are you assuring that those children, like you say, that don't utilize the library to any extent? How are you assuring at those sites that the library is kid-friendly enough that everybody's using it? In my mind, that's an effective library because it's there for all the students in the school, and if they're not all using it, then it's an elite process that some students are and many students are not. So, I'm asking this, and I know probably already know the answer to it because I was, part of school, so I know some teachers think it's a waste of time going to the library, because they think they could better service their child in the classroom, and I want to know how you drive that literacy.
Absolutely.
What do you do from the library standpoint?
The way I target that is to see all of our classes through ELA so that I know they are getting seen. But then we also work collaboratively with science, social studies, and pull them in. And you were talking about reluctant teachers. I know exactly what you're talking about. So the way we target them, because that's our job to get them in there, is that we look at their Rubicon Atlas and see what lessons they're on, what content they're studying, and we go present to them. How can I help you? Here's resources. Here's a lesson idea. And it ends up being wonderful collaboration between that classroom teacher and that school librarian where you're co-teaching. Sometimes that's in the media center. Sometimes that's in their classroom. Sometimes that is also, I have been so overbooked before that I would make a video lesson for them to use in class too, just so that I could be in different places at different times.
All right, Angela, do you have any questions? I just have one question. The money that the schools, when you're given money to purchase books for the libraries, is that school specific? Is that a principal decision? From my experience, it was always the principal who decided how much of my school budget was going to go to the library.
So that's actually a practice that still exists. And we've added additional funding through instructional services. We've been able to land on reminders to the schools. These are materials for the media or funding for the school library. So in order to assure that, I think in working with Colleen and Ann, we want to take another approach. So if I send 2,500, 3,500 to a school from the district level, we want to make sure that it gets in the hands of our school librarians. So one of the questions, and also, and I have to add, is the budgeting, because when you go through looking at the libraries and utilization and the frequency of some books and genres of what interests our students, that weeding process will deplete. So we're just starting on that right now, to be very direct. That's where Mrs. Rowland, because as they weed out, there's going to be additional funding. We're going to have to look at attending to our school libraries as well.
I think that with what I'm hearing you say in terms of how you work collaboratively with the teachers, and I know that, you know, my librarians always pulled books on whatever the science topic was for 4th grade or whatever and, you know, it was a special place in the media center where the kids came and the teachers just so appreciated that. And by working collaboratively, you can also point out to the teachers where we need to buy more books, where we need to supplement. So that was my only point. Okay. Any other, we're kind of on a time crunch. Is there any other question that really needs to, Ms. Fridges, do you have anything? Okay. Mr. Smith? Okay. All right. So the next, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Stratos.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. Mrs. Roban, at this point, we have Karen McKinsey and Nicholas Flowers joining us. If you look in your folder, you have a textbook adoption. We have a quick presentation. Many of you are familiar with what you're going to see up front. At this point, I do want to present Karen McKinsey and Nicholas Flowers.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is the normal textbook adoption. So if you remember in the fall, we completed that special adoption, which was the state had provided special revenue to do a mass textbook adoption. This adoption here is to request approval for just our standard cycle of textbook adoptions, thinking that as we go through, the textbooks are standards-based, have been reviewed by the State Department and have been approved for funding. And so then it now allows schools to go through. They've really been focusing on modernizing the adoption process, looking at all of the various instructional materials and bundles for this adoption cycle.
And of course, we followed the same administrative regulation, IS 36, that we typically do. So our district textbook coordinator, Stacy Cleveland, sends that out, and that went out to them early on for them to review the content areas and the grade levels that were being considered. There's always a list of publishers and textbooks provided by the South Carolina Department of Education, so that goes out to everyone. And then there's a caravan, and this year our caravan was held at the University of South Carolina at Beaufort, so it was back being face-to-face, so our community could get in and really see those books. And then it goes to school consensus, and in that school's consensus, each teacher who teaches that course has the opportunity to review those materials, and then as a school, they sit down together and complete a form that we provide, which is IS 36E, and they come up with a school consensus that comes back to us here at the district office, and we go through and determine which ones our district is going to be adopting.
So for this year, the state has approved funding for these textbook areas. So looking at economics and personal finances for grade 9-12, human geography and advanced placement, macroeconomics and microeconomics for advanced placement, science K-8, and then social studies grades K-2 and grade 6. We're requesting approval at the elementary levels for social studies K-2, adopting My World, which is the Savas Learning Company, formerly Pearson. And then for science for those grades 5, and this also aligns to the new science standards that were recently adopted by the State Department, and that will be phasing in. The new program for approval would be Savas Learning Company, the South Carolina Elevate Science Program.
And then at the secondary level, specifically for grades 6 through 8, we have the grade 6 World History, which is the National Geographic Cengage series. And that is World History Great Civilizations. Also in grades 6 through 8, we have Science, the Savas Learning Company, and that is a continuation of what our teachers picked for K-5. They chose South Carolina Elevate Science. Continuing on with our secondary levels, specifically grades 9 through 12, Human Geography, Savas Learning Company. This is Contemporary Human Geography. It's the 4th edition of this textbook, and this is the one that has been adopted by the state. The AP Human Geography, which is Human Geography for AP students. That's the Bedford, Friedman, and Worth. Psychology, thinking about psychology, again, it's a 4th edition, and that's a Blair Broker Ernest textbook. Economics and Personal Finance, Understanding Economics by McGraw-Hill. And then Macroeconomics AP, they went with the Proven's Economics for the AP course, and that's a 3rd edition for us. And then we move into our next steps, which of course, the Beaufort County School District Textbook Coordinator is going to forward the Beaufort County textbook selections to the State Department of Education, pending your, after your approval. Those textbooks will then be available for our school textbook coordinators to place pre-orders during May. And that's going to run from May 9th to the 27th. And that again pens financing from the state, which right now they're currently funded.
Quick question, do you happen to know how many community members went to review any of these textbooks?
No, we published.
I'm sorry, Ms. Goodrich, what was the question? I mean, Ms. Robon, what was the question?
I was wondering if we knew how many people from the community actually took the time to go review the textbooks. I understand it was published, it was sent home with all the schools.
And electronically.
And electronically. I just wanted to know, do we know if anybody actually took the time?
I've not seen any communication regarding that. Karen or Nick, I've not seen anything, even memorandums or update on it publishing.
No, Dr. Stratus, there weren't numbers maintained on that, but we were very fortunate because the textbook coordinators, textbook companies also provided links. So a lot of our parents could have digitally tapped into that as well. So it's very hard to determine.
Ms. Goodrich?
Thank you. The other question I have is about the supplemental materials. Do most of these textbooks come in other languages? So to help with, do they come in other languages?
A lot of them have a Spanish supplemental addition to it. So those will come with the addition when they come for us, yes.
But it's not typically.
It's not typical. It's an electronic, they can be linked on to translate.
Okay.
But in our dual language programs, we are providing our materials in both languages. We've actually updated Hilton Head Elementary IB to have the materials in ELA as well. So that's something we've been working with Dr. Owen, and we'll review with Dr. Owen, we're developing also at Constance's school. So we're expanding. That's actually incurred through us an expense.
Yes.
Well, I think that's important because it really supports the teacher that has that student that doesn't speak English. It's very difficult in the classroom without it, so.
So at this time, do we have a motion from the committee to recommend these textbooks to the full board adoption? We need to bring this to the main meeting.
Madam Chair, I move that we recommend the adoption of textbooks.
Recommend the textbook.
Textbook adoption of the 2022-2023 school year.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of bringing this to a full board? Unanimous? Okay. And then thank you, everyone. In the interest of time, we will we will talk about somehow maybe digital, when we're gonna meet again.
Thanks, Matt.
Usually it's the fourth, Wednesday, but the fourth Wednesday of June is the Wednesday right before, no, right before 4th of July. So I thought maybe we could move it up to June 22nd and the 29th. Where are you going? All right.
So ISD team, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, we have to run.
And just-
Thank you.
Just remember all the documents.